Hi, it's Dr. Parikh. So, coping with social anxiety, and you can kind of see a theme in the different topics for this module. And again, these were built out of things that students in my first run through of this class were interested in, but I think that they are often things that are kind of universal. Most people want to be better at small talk, and many of us who are interested in a course like this and drawn to helping fields also have some level of social anxiety, or we will be interacting with people who do. If you do have social anxiety, if the thought of social, and not necessarily just, a diagnosable condition, but if you find yourself worrying, getting nervous, kind of perseverating, where you just ruminate, you just go over and over and over again about what might go wrong or what went wrong, I hope that this information will be helpful. One way to help is to anticipate what might happen. Now, it's hard because you want to have a functional, adaptive level of anticipating. If you spend an entire week before an outing constantly just racked with anxiety, trying to predict everything that might happen, that's probably not terribly helpful. But I already talked about planning responses to common questions or situations, so kind of and it may even include role playing, either saying out loud or even asking someone to practice with you or working with a therapist to practice. Keep in mind, I've talked about this before, you have to let go of controlling other people's responses. You can't outmaneuver difficult people perfectly, but you can anticipate some things that might happen and practice setting boundaries. Remember that no is a complete sentence. I mentioned that I have a family member who there is no situation that this person cannot make seem worse. And rather than trying to perfectly predict their reaction and plan around it, I purposely, I cope by waiting until I feel okay enough with the situation to handle whatever. I just assume that the conversation is going to be a little distressing. And so I wait until I'm in a good place. I wait until I feel a little more settled, and I wait until I know that I will have something kind of pleasant afterward, something to distract me and help me transition out of whatever funk I might fall into. And now it's finally reached a point where most of the time I can laugh about how difficult that person's response is. So prediction can help, but also don't stress yourself out trying to perfectly control a situation that will never be controlled. So again, you can practice. With business networking, we often talk about an elevator speech, so how you kind of talk about yourself, your interests, your skills, and where you want to go in your career in a sort of 30-second setting. The idea that if you're getting in an elevator with someone and you have just that little window of time, how can you try to make an impression? And so thinking about how to do things like that for friends or family, especially around sensitive questions, to rehearse those. So things like, when will you graduate? Which, particularly if you're in a doctoral program, that's a really difficult question to answer. Do you have a job yet? When are you going to get married? And if you're married, then when are you going to have a kid? And if you have a kid, like literally even I've had like fast food workers ask me, like, oh, he's almost 2, it's time to have another one. So the asks just keep coming. Why don't you dress like whatever? And that could be a gendered question. It could be just a personal preference question. There's a lot of things that could go in there. So again, especially around things like pregnancy and child rearing, there are so many questions and opinions. So it may be helpful to rehearse. I know for me, when I'm caught off guard and I'm in a grumpy mood because lots of people have been having opinions, what comes out of my mouth might not be the best or nicest or kindest version of me. And so it's important to set boundaries and be the authority on you, but it's also good to maintain relationships. So being intentional about how you respond to those questions. And that's not to say that you have to be super nice and political for every answer, but if your response is, take it or leave it. This is who I am. Make sure that that's what you meant to say. Mean what you say and say what you mean. It can be helpful. So if you struggle with social anxieties, looking for settings or actions that feel more comfortable. I mentioned that volunteering, a lot of this is kind of similar to some other things that I've talked about in previous mini lectures. I like volunteering because it gives kind of a shared focus. You're side by side instead of just staring at each other trying to make friends. Or I like having some other group that has an interest, like finding a knitting group on Meetup or whatever is your interest. Something that may help if you're trying to find ways to build relationships might be, if you get invited to an event, say, oh, can I come early and help you set up? Or can I stay? Or, at the end saying, oh, can I stick around and help you clean up? One thing that can help me, particularly when I am at my partner's family events, not so much now. Now I've settled in a lot more, but we've also been married for 10 years. But earlier on in the relationship, I would often engage with the kids in the family. Also now I have a kid, so that's usually taking a lot of my time at a family event. He's not quite old enough to be like, see ya, Mom. I look forward to that. But for a while I would kind of be the fun aunt, and I would often, as I've mentioned, I like games, and so I would bring some board games to play with the younger kids. Or I would just chase them and tickle them and whatever. Another way could be, and again, this is something I've done, I'm not a big drinker, and particularly when I was on my internship in Minnesota, I lived out in the suburbs, whereas the other two interns that I would go out with lived closer to the cities, cities being the Twin Cities. And so I would often just say, well, I have to get home at the end of the night anyway, and it was, Uber wasn't a big thing yet, but I definitely couldn't have afforded to Uber that far on my salary anyway. So I would say like, oh, I'll DD, you guys drink and do whatever. So thinking of ways that feel, and again, I wasn't a big drinker, but I didn't mind being the DD and hanging out with them. So thinking about what would work for you that would feel comfortable, that would kind of have you involved. I mentioned before avoiding awfulizing. So countering negative thoughts. I know I never want to leave the house, but I usually have a good time when I go out with these friends. So instead of being like, this is awful, I don't want to leave, I'm not going to like it, instead saying, I know that right now I would rather just stay where I am. But once I'm out, I usually enjoy it. Or it could also be setting a measurable goal. So saying, I'll talk to 3 people, and then if I still don't really feel into it, I'll leave. Or I'm going to go for at least 30 minutes, and if I'm not having fun, I can go home, but if I am, I'll stay. And to really be okay with going home if you're not having fun after 30 minutes, but often you'll find that once you're there, you do get into it. Not every time, and that's okay. Notice what helps you feel better. So what things, kind of paying attention to what helps and then trying to draw those in more. One piece is clothes, thinking about kind of what kind of image do you want to portray, what will make you feel good once you're there. So you could want to be sort of this bold and brave, or you might want something that just feels really cozy and comfortable. Or you, particularly if it's like a work function or something where you're not really sure what the norm is going to be, you might want to try to do something that you think is just going to blend in. And it's important, again, when your focus is on how you'll feel in the moment, think about how others might respond to the way you're dressed, and make sure, and it's not to say that any one approach is the right approach, but make sure that you're comfortable with what that approach is going to say about you, and that you may choose different things at different times and places. Also, especially if you find that you're more sensitive to sensory things, keep that in mind. If you want something to fidget with, like I'll fidget with my wedding ring a lot, I fidget with my hair a lot, I'll fidget with my necklace. But it might also be keeping something in your pocket, or depending on the setting, I might bring some knitting. So like family events, I'll often bring a little knitting with me. It may just be small and in my purse, and I may bring that out just to kind of help me feel less antsy but still available to talk. For dogs, sometimes I've heard the idea of thunder vests, that you'll put it kind of just something tight and cozy. I know one of my friends in grad school, she would put her dog in a little Halloween costume that wrapped around him, and that was enough to help him when there was company coming over. But taking that same idea, they make clothing that is specifically to reduce anxiety, that kind of gives you a little hug. I know one content creator I follow online has talked about how corsets really help with her anxiety. Also for her, if she does cosplay somewhere, that feels a lot safer. I think the idea of a mask and this sort of armor around her. But you can think more subtly about things like having a belt or a cozy sweater. I have found that hats really help me relax and feel calm. If it's especially in a stimulating environment, having a brim, that just cuts off. It helps with my headaches too, because too much light really irritates my brain. But it just cuts off some of the stimulation. Or having like just a cozy, like toboggan type hat. Just kind of that head hug helps me a lot too. There are also times that I will wear earplugs because, as I've mentioned before, too much noise really sets me on edge. And so if we're in a loud, crowded environment, having earplugs might help me. I do it in movies too. So becoming more aware of your senses, and also I don't know if I mention it in here, I don't think so because this is my last one, but also noticing how to calm yourself when you're feeling anxious. Like one of the things I'll do sometimes is I'll just kind of massage my wrists. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to show you this. So for example, if I'm at a movie and it's getting a little intense and I'm getting just too much stimulation, I might do that. I might notice my breathing and try to breathe in. For me, kind of rubbing on my sternum right here helps a lot too. Another thing I noticed, I mentioned in another video that I went to a big gaming con, PAX Unplugged, and one thing I found, I had 2 bags with me. I had a backpack that would fold up into a little small thing, and then I also had like a sling bag that went over one shoulder and down and around. And I found that the sling bag felt really nice because it put that pressure right on my chest, whereas the backpack didn't. So I think the next time I go to something like that, I may compromise. I may do a sturdier bag that doesn't fold up as nicely, but that has a chest strap, because that'll give that same pressure across the chest. Or in some way plan to have a bag that goes over my chest so that I have that little just calming effect. So if you experience social anxiety, start really, and again, there's lots of resources online. You can start exploring and know that not everyone's experience is going to be the same. The suggestions I'm giving are not exclusively my personal experience, but are certainly going to be influenced by my experiences with anxiety in social settings and what's helped me cope. And also the stories of other people I've heard. But I think just the more you know yourself, the more creative you can be with finding ways around those difficulties. I hope something from this was helpful. Take good care. Bye-bye.